good morning. Thank you very much for joining us today. Before we start the session, I wanted to just very quickly introduce you to HDK, who is running the session today, just in case we have any webinar first timers. So HDK is a digital agency that provides design, website and marketing services to arts and cultural organizations to help them connect with their audiences. So as well as these services, we offer a free webinar each month like this one on different digital marketing topics. And this session today will explore what we can all be doing to make our social media a bit more accessible. So that's HDK. And now for some personal introductions. I am Phoebe. I'm a woman in my 30s with white skin and blonde hair pulled back into a bun, and I'm wearing a beige top today. I'm HDK's client relationship manager, and I work with all of our new clients to identify the best bespoke package for them before handing over to the project team for delivery. Also talking today is Meg and Ali from HDK, so I'll just hand over to Meg to introduce herself first.
Hi everyone, lovely to see you all today. My name is Meg. I'm a white woman in her 20s. I've got long black hair and a white top. I am marketing manager at HDK, so I work with our clients across the arts, culture and heritage sectors on everything digital marketing and digital advertising, tour marketing and strategy. I will pass over to Ali.
Hello, I'm Ali. I'm a white woman in her 20s with long brown hair, and I am wearing a black turtleneck top today. I'm the marketing coordinator at HDK, so I work with Meg and the marketing team on all the lovely things Meg just mentioned. So I will pass on to Adi.
Thank you. Yes. Adi, we have a guest speaker today joining us from AbilityNet. So I wanted to ask if you could just quickly introduce yourself to everyone here today.
Absolutely. Hello there, everyone. I'm Adi Latif. I'm male. Gosh, I've just hit my 40s. Oh my God. I've got dark skin, black hair. And I think I'm wearing a dark top. It could be black, could be dark green, I've been told. I am a consultant at a digital inclusion charity called AbilityNet. I also have lived experience of disability, so I'm blind and I am a screen reader user, and I'll be chipping in today's session. Thank you.
Thank you, Adi. It's really lovely to have you today. So just a quick outline of today's session so everybody knows what to expect. So first, Meg will be exploring what it means to be accessible on social media. Next, Ali and Meg will be sharing some practical steps you can take to improve your online accessibility, looking at some quick wins, followed by some longer term steps and measures that you can take. Then we are going to have a chat with Adi to hear in his experience and expertise what people can be doing and any advice that he's able to share with us today. We're then going to do a very quick survey, and finally we will open up for questions and a bit more of a discussion on the topic of social media accessibility. So lots to cover, and to begin the session I am going to hand over to Meg.
Great, thank you so much, Phoebe. Brilliant. So let's kick off with understanding accessibility. So we've got a quote from Alistair Duggan, who is the head of accessibility at UK Government Digital Services. So Alistair says, accessibility means that people can do what they need to do in a similar amount of time and effort as someone that does not have a disability. It means that people are empowered, can be independent, and will not be frustrated by something that is poorly designed or implemented. So approaching your social media in this way means actively working to remove the barriers in place that might exclude or restrict someone from experiencing your social media posts. In this session, we're going to explore some of the ways we can quite easily remove these barriers, as well as, like Phoebe said, some longer term strategic steps. So myself and the rest of the team at HDK may be digital marketing experts, but we're not experts in all things accessibility. With our own work and with our clients, we are continually working to keep up to date with things like platform features that might help us be more accessible. And we're constantly working to strengthen our own approach to accessibility. Our hope with this session is to come together and share some practical tips that we've come across, and also support each other in making our industry more accessible online. And of course, we have Addy here to help us all with that. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand over to Ali, who is going to share some of the tips she has come across.
Thanks, Meg. So yeah, first we're going to go through some of the quick things that you can get started on right now to improve your accessibility on social media. So let's start by looking at how we can make social media copywriting more accessible. So the first thing is accessible language. You want to write your captions in a way that's easy for everyone to understand, of course, whilst still conveying your organization's tone of voice. So this means avoiding jargon or technical terms or abbreviations, and try to use, capital letters sparingly and appropriately rather than capitalizing entire words to make them stand out. This is particularly important for using screen readers, which is a technology that converts written captions to speech or braille. The next is to make your hashtags accessible. So again, it's helpful for screen readers if you capitalize the first letter in each word of a hashtag. This is known as camel case. So for instance, if you were going to write the hashtag camel case, you would use a capital C at the beginning of both camel and case, and you would keep the other letters all lowercase. And it's named after camels because the capital letters resemble the humps on a camel's back. So that may or may not make it easier to remember. And then let's have a look at emoji use. So I think the use of emojis can often be missed when thinking about accessibility. A lot of the time we think about how an emoji looks to someone reading the caption, but we should also consider how the emoji would sound for those using a screen reader. When choosing an emoji, you can look up how it translates to text and make sure that it still complements the caption. Generally, it's good to keep them to a minimum, no more than sort of 2 per post. And we're going to show a quick example we have of how emojis register when passing through a screen reader. So you can see why too many could be very disruptive.
Frame I red heart emojis, beaming face with smiling eyes, grinning face with big eyes, face with tears of joy, grinning face with big eyes, grinning face with big eyes, grinning face with big eyes. But let's keep them down, waving hand, because they are very annoying. Weary face, dizzy face, person gesturing no for screen reader users, smiling face with halo, baby angel, light skin tone, baby angel, medium dark skin tone, baby angel, dark skin tone, baby angel, medium skin tone. Relieved face, folded hands, here no evil monkey.
So as you can see, that's quite difficult to take in what was going on there. So moving on from copywriting, how can we make our visual content more accessible on social media? So the first thing is to use alt text on your images. Now, this is something that hopefully most of you are familiar with. Alt text stands for alternative text, and it provides a written description of an image, making it possible for people unable to see it, still able to understand the context of the image within the social media post. So a good piece of alt text will communicate the content of an image or GIF, and it will transcribe any text within the image, as well as hopefully conveying the general tone of the image if appropriate. So we have a couple of examples here that we could take a look at. So our first example on the right, this photo, it might read, a hand holds up a graduation cap in front of a building. The graduation cap is sharply in the focus against the blurred background. And our next example, for this one, the alt text might read, a performer moving on a stage in a flowy dress facing the audience away from the camera. The performer is lit by a dark orange light. So hopefully providing a bit more context to the image. So let's think about some tips for videos. So with almost all of the platforms pushing video content at the moment, ensuring that your video content is accessible is really important. And while there are a number of actions you can take to remove barriers from your video content, we're going to run through some of the simple things that you can do before hopefully we get some expert advice from Addy later on. So first, let's think about audio. You want to make sure that you use quality audio with low background noise, especially for TikTok and Reels. You don't want the music to be too loud if there's, you know, a dialogue in it. And if there's dialogue in the audio, you want to make sure that it's clear, easy to understand, and moderately paced. You also want to allow pauses for people to process the information. And if possible, try to make the speaker's face or mouth visible for anyone who uses mouth movement to help them understand spoken language. And finally, of course, you want to make sure that captions are provided in an appropriate font, size, and color. Before moving on to the rest of the tips, I do want to acknowledge that some of these tips that I've just mentioned are quite contradictory to many of the trends that we see on TikTok, where fast-paced content is, you know, the norm, as well as very fast-paced voiceovers. And ultimately, TikTok is not the most accessible social media platform. And it's always important to consider making your content accessible for all versus, you know, kind of scoring on a trend. So continuing on with a couple of more tips for your video content. You should avoid using footage that flashes more than 3 times in any 1 second period. And where possible, particularly for longer form videos, you should provide a transcript, which is a text version of the speech and non-speech audio, such as music. It's also useful to plan to include descriptions of any visual information included in the video, so that those who are visually impaired can receive the same information. So an example of this might be, instead of the speaker saying, as you can see on this chart, sales increased from the first quarter to the second quarter, the speaker might say instead, this chart shows that sales increased significantly from 1 million in the first quarter to 1.3 million in the second quarter, so that nobody loses out on the visual information shown in the video. And finally, you might also want to consider the use of a sign language interpreter in your video content. If you do use an interpreter, you want to make sure that you plan there to be room for them in the bottom right corner. So with that, I will hand over to Meg to talk a little bit about some practical design tips.
Thanks, Ali. Great. So the final quick win we'll talk about today, I know it's been a lot of kind of information heavy, hopefully practical tips you can make a quick checklist of, is designing with color contrast for things like graphics on social media. So color contrast is important as it can influence the readability of your content. And according to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, you should aim for a contrast ratio between the text and background greater than or equal to 4:5:1 for small text and 3:1 for large text. This might sound technical, but these ratios ultimately exist to make sure there's enough contrast between the colors you've used for as many people as possible to see them clearly. So there are tools that we will share at the end of today's session so that you can easily check all of your content. But for now, let's just look at a visual example. So we've got 4 boxes on the screen with various 2-tone color contrast displayed. So on the top left, we have contrast. That's black text on a bright yellow background. Contrast is the difference in luminance between colors that makes an object easily distinguishable. On the top right, we have high visibility, which is a dark blue background with white text. And the text reads high visibility, and it's exactly that. On the bottom left, we have green background with dark blue text, which reads low visibility. This color combination makes it difficult for visually impaired people, so those with low vision, color blindness, or those who use monochrome screens, for instance, to distinguish between the background and the text. And lastly, bottom right, we have a dark red background with green text, which reads vibrates. So vibrates are typically red-green or red-blue. And those are high contrast colors that appear to vibrate when you look at them. These are difficult to consume, but placing a neutral color between the two areas can really help here. And a comment's just come in that says visibility is spelt wrong, which is incredibly ironic. We pulled this from the internet and did not check. Thank you for keeping us in check. So if you want to check the color contrast of your design, again, there are lots of free tools that you can easily search online. So we will share that at the end. That's all for our quick win suggestions. Thank you, Ali, for those as well. And before we open up into a discussion today, let's take a look at a couple of longer term measures. So making your social media accessible is something we can all start working on straight away. And I'm sure lots of you are already doing this. So making a checklist for our pieces of content is great. But there's also some strategic longer term measures we can take to make sure we're working smarter in the long term. The first of these is periodic reviews. So once you've identified these day-to-day actions, it is important to regularly review whether this work has been effective and implemented. We're all very busy people with lots on our plate. So we would suggest running something like a quarterly review to go through your social media and check if your posts are still adhering to your accessibility checklist. This is also a really good opportunity to, as a team or as an individual, check all of the platforms you're using for any developments in the accessibility technology that they offer, such as scheduling platforms offering alt text in scheduling and planning your content in recent years. And lastly, we've got inclusive usability testing. This is perhaps the most important. So beyond assessing your accessibility in-house, it can be incredibly beneficial to ask other people for feedback. Now, there are lots of organizations that you can work with who offer inclusive usability testing, which is essentially a group of people who face access barriers interacting with your website or your social media to provide feedback for you to implement. So we are currently working with an agency called Accessible by Design to do this for one of our clients. They offer some really great services in accessibility auditing and consultation. So if you are interested in exploring accessibility further, we highly recommend them. Again, we will share their information at the end of the session. And of course, this brings us on to the next section of the webinar with another organization, AbilityNet, another great organization who offer a range of services and training when it comes to accessibility. So Phoebe, I will hand back to you for this discussion.
Thank you, Meg and Ali. Thank you for sharing those tips so far. That's been really useful to hear. And we're going to move on to a discussion now with Adi, and I think sometimes it helps to receive information in different ways so that we can all kind of process it. Just also to note, we are going to have an opportunity for everybody to ask their questions in around 15 minutes, but for the sake of time today, we've prepared 4 questions for Adi, and yeah, so we're gonna get started on those. So thank you so much, Adi, for joining us. We're so grateful to yourself and to AbilityNet for joining us today. So I wonder if firstly you could kind of just tell us about yourself and about your kind of background in this topic.
Yeah, no, thank you. Hi everyone. So I guess my background to accessibility was started at university a long time ago. I started using a screen reader at university, and I got into finding that websites were not very accessible with my screen reader, and at that point in my life, I decided to start helping organizations to identify issues that they were having with their websites, and we were following the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which were created back then, and ever since I've been involved in accessibility, and about 7 years ago I joined AbilityNet. I also worked as a management consultant. I took a break from accessibility, worked as a management consultant, and then realized that the world is becoming more and more digital, and the digital world, you know, is really powerful. It allows disabled people to you know, to do things that weren't possible before. Just simply like in the past, I couldn't flag a taxi off the street because I couldn't see it, but now using an app such as Uber and using a screen reader on my phone, I can flag a virtual taxi. So that's just one example of how the digital world is, you know, is so powerful and inherently barrier free. And the barriers that are created in the digital world are usually just down to people, you know, not designing properly and not understanding human diversity and understanding the needs. And social media, obviously, is a powerful tool to connect people. And so it's very, very important that that's what it does. It connects people, and when we make inaccessible content, then that's leading to disconnection and it's leading to exclusion. And so it's really important that, you know, people realize it's a human thing, not just some technical requirements. I kind of went on there, so hope that answered the
No,
question.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And I think that's such an important point, that it's, you know, it's not a technical like checkbox that people need to meet. It's a human matter. So yeah, I think that's really useful to hear. So thank you. So obviously we've shared a bit of a whistle stop tour of some of our findings so far, but what would you say are the main kind of measures that people can be taking to be more accessible with their use of social media?
I mean, I think the points, really practical points you guys covered in the presentation. It's really, really great. I think it's just always very, very good to take a little step back just before you're creating a post of some type, and just try and understand, will this fit with the people that will be receiving it? A lot of the times, you know, we fall into the trap that we think of ourselves and we think of our kind of circle of friends and family, and it's very difficult for us to kind of think outside that. So I think it's quite useful to understand there's people with different needs, and one way, you know, you can do that is by perhaps having personas or having some profiles of people that are different. People have different needs, and the Gov UK website, they've got some personas on that, people, you know, with the different types of needs. So it's quite nice to have in the forefront, you know, people, and also maybe look at people on social media, look at people with disabilities. You know, there's a lot of influencers out there, there's just a lot of people, you know, sharing about the disability. So kind of tap into that a little bit to understand, you know, what the sentiment is out there, what is on people's minds. Maybe look at how they're doing their content. Social media has been difficult. It's not always been easy to do things accessibly, you know, on social media. So even if you know your heart's in the right place, it wasn't always easy, and even to this day, there's some, you know, sort of weird limitations that are out there. So but yeah, just be aware of people who are different from you, people who are you know, have different needs, and yeah, just make sure that the content, I will say, you know, it won't be accessible for everybody all the time. So, you know, don't get stuck with that. But even if you're making a little improvement to what you've done before, you know, this is a step in the right direction. So don't get overwhelmed, and you know, that whole thing about paralysis through analysis. So don't worry. But as long as, you know, there's some progression going on, then you know, if you've added one alt text as opposed to 0 alt text, you've made that one post slightly better for some people. So yeah, just remember that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's so helpful. And I think I've found the user profiles that you mentioned, the government user profiles. So I'll include a link to those in the chat at the end of the session for anybody that wants to check those out. I was going to ask about that kind of feeling of overwhelmed that some people might kind of, I think sometimes, as you say, there's a perception that in order to be accessible, and in an ideal world, we would be accessible to all. But I think for some people, that is an overwhelming prospect of like going from, if somebody has a not very accessible social media presence to a completely accessible social media presence, it can feel, like a gargantuan undertaking.
Yeah.
So yeah, what would you say for, I think you've said it nicely there, but is there anything else that you would kind of say to people who might feel overwhelmed by that prospect?
I think it's good to know where you are at the moment. One of the things I do at AbilityNet, so I'm not always on the social media side. We've got far better consultants for that, focus on that. But one of the things I do is I help organizations embed accessibility. So it's business as usual in their organizations, and as part of that, the first step we do is understand where you currently are at. So be great to just see what your posts are like right now, identify maybe what's missing, have an idea of where you want to get to, in the ideal world, what your vision is with regards to your social media, how do you want to make it inclusive, have an idea of that, and then just make some just create some sort of steps to move slowly towards that. Like you said, it's not just overnight from being really inaccessible to being accessible. That's just not realistic, and your platforms, for example, might not support that. You might need to write some guidance for people in your organization. You might need to change the processes a little bit, procedures. So there's a lot involved, but I think the great thing is to have a good starting point, to understand where you're at. And it might not be great, probably isn't for, it's the same with a lot of organizations. Decide where you want to get to, and then just start making some incremental steps, to move you closer to that. I know that's quite vague, but I think sometimes it's nicer to think at a higher level rather than get so caught up in the detail.
Thank you. I think it's really useful to have those practical measures because it kind of gives you something tangible that you can kind of start with to make it all seem a bit more approachable, basically. So that's so useful to know. Thank you. And of course, we are going to open up to a Q&A in just a moment, but I wanted to ask, we're going to put on screen now a slide about AbilityNet. And I wanted to ask Addy if you could kind of just tell us about the services that you offer at AbilityNet and a little bit about this training that you have coming up.
Sure. And for people that don't know AbilityNet, we do quite a few things. We're a digital inclusion charity, so our vision is to make the digital world accessible to all. We have over 350 volunteers that go into the homes of disabled people, virtually mostly nowadays, and help them get onto tech. We have an accessibility arm that helps organizations, audit. We audit their websites, we audit their apps, we help you embed accessibility in your organization at a strategic level, and we offer loads of training. So we offer role-based training, so for people like designers and developers and testers and project managers and content writers, we do all of that stuff, and we offer training on using things like screen readers, using assistive technology, and as part of our training package, we have social media. So within the social media training, and so I've got some colleagues that present the social media training, and within that it's quite a comprehensive session covering the stuff that's been covered today. It just might goes into a little bit more depth because we have more time, and it goes through the various platforms, and how you can create social media, inclusive social media on those platforms, and because obviously we work with a lot of different clients, we have experience and we can understand the pain points that different organizations face. So, we can help answer any questions people have, you know, based on the sort of collective challenges people are facing. So that's what we do, and we can do bespoke training, or we can offer training where you just buy a seat on the session.
So now we are going to move on to taking some questions so that we can kind of open up a bit more of a discussion around the topic of accessibility on social media. I can see that we've had some questions in the chat so far, which we will come to very shortly, but we actually had one question pre-submitted because that is an option for all of our webinars, so please feel free to use that if you want to in future. So the question that was pre-submitted is, if we use a platform such as Hootsuite to schedule our posts, how can we ensure accessibility? Because they don't tend to provide options such as adding alt text, etc. And the second point to this question is, do you recommend any free tools for adding subtitles to videos? So I'm going to hand over to Ali to just start answering that question. And then, yeah, hopefully we can gain some more insights on that.
Cool. Also, sorry, I apologize, everyone. It looks like I've got a filter. I'm just in a direct sunlight, so I look a bit crazy at the moment. But in terms of alt text, Hootsuite is quite frustrating. It allows you to add alt text to images in Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, but not for Instagram. However, it is possible to do that in Meta Business Suite, and you can also add alt text to your Instagram posts natively in the app. It's just very frustrating that you can't do everything all in one in Hootsuite. And subtitles wise, Meg, did you have a comment you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of things you can do. We love CapCut, the editing app for social media videos, with the option to kind of add subtitles quite easily. Alternatively, a great way to add subtitles to a video is uploading a video to YouTube and then creating an SRT file through there. And then you can export the SRT file and upload that to all of your scheduling platforms and social media platforms. Again, there's sometimes some issues that we run into with various platforms and things not pulling through. But typically it does work. And I think this speaks to another comment we had in the chat that other people have kind of jumped in on, which is fantastic, about Facebook not including alt text once it's actually published through Business Suite. Again, there's a hidden button to click, save alt text, which I find usually does the trick. So perhaps that's it. And Meta Business Suite does actually let you add alt text to Instagram. Again, you just have to click add alt text. It's slightly hidden, and make sure you click save, and then it should pull through. Feel free to jump in, everyone and anyone, if you've had any frustrating instances or problems that you've been able to solve. I'll pass back to Phoebe for the rest of the discussion.
Thank you. Just very quickly, Diane asked what the name of the subtitle tool was. If you could just repeat that, please, Meg.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll pop it in the chat as well. So CapCut is the editing software that you can use on your phone. It's an app created, it's free. It's created by the people who made TikTok. So particularly for TikTok videos, they very much speak to each other. So the functions that you'll have on TikTok, you will also find on CapCut. It's also great for Instagram or Facebook videos, Twitter videos, etc. And then natively in YouTube, I'll just pop this in. You can add an SRT file and export it.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to try and work through the questions as chronologically as possible. There might be some overlap in the questions that people have asked. So the first question, and this was actually, I think, inspired by the typo that we had in our slide. Gary asked, and I think maybe, Adi, I know you have some personal experience with screen readers. How do typos affect screen readers, and how does that affect the experience for you?
So as a blind person, I'm quite a good proofreader actually, because the screen reader will pick up the typo in two ways. One, it will announce the word um, really differently, so it's quite obvious that there's a typo there, because I'm a bit dyslexic. So when I'm writing words like from or form, I get them confused. So the screen reader will read it out differently, but also the screen reader can tell you when something is misspelt. So when words are, for example, underlined in Microsoft Word, say if you're using that, you can have it. You can customize your screen reader as much as there's so many different ways you can customize it. But one method is for it to enable it to flag every time there's a typo, so it can say misspelt word when you come to it. But the obvious and simplest way is it sounds different. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. And definitely a reminder for us to proofread a bit more closely. So thank you. That's really useful to know. We have another question. So this person has asked two different questions. This is, I think, Parsi. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Apologies if not. So they have asked Addy specifically, how do people born blind receive and or perceive visual information in alt text, such as in focus or orange light, for example?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. I wasn't born blind, so I can't give you the authentic answer to it. And also I think it will depend on the persons. When someone is born, most people aren't born blind, just to put that there also. But if you're born blind, this is what your experience of not seeing is your norm. And then you kind of create an understanding of what things such as color are. So if you ask two different people who are born blind, they're what a green would be to them, it would probably be two different things. Someone might associate a color such as green with grass or nature, or someone might associate it with a sweetie, a candy, one of the first candies they had. So it can be associated with colors, can be associated with things. So but you can't make the assumption that if someone's born blind, they're not going to benefit from color, because most blind people are living in society and families and have friends, and not everyone is blind around them. So you can't make that assumption. But yeah, just to answer your question of what a person perceives when you use words such as color and imagery depends on their experience.
Thank you. That's really helpful context, I think. And this is actually somebody else's question, but I think feels relevant to this one. Harriet has commented saying, in alt text, how important is it to visually describe the people in the image? So whether it's ace, race, or gender. And Harriet says it can sometimes feel a little sensitive to highlight all of this information.
It's a great question, Harry. I would just say it just depends on the context. That's generally a good rule for alt text. Anyway, so if I'm on my banking website and I'm just trying to, do my banking, and there's images there of, I don't know, a happy family, in the park or something, I really don't need to know that kind of stuff. So, you can have alt text for that. Empty, for example, I just want to get to my accounts. But if I'm on a website where I'm trying to book a holiday, and there's images of the resort and the beach, and I want to know what that looks like. I want you to go into detail in that. If I'm on a website of a university and there's students there, picture of students, I would probably want to know, the kind of colors of the people there. I just want to know how diverse this is. Or if I'm on, the website of a board of a company or something, I would probably want to know the colors of the people in the genders and stuff like that. So it just depends on the context. I've noticed recently in audio description in things like Netflix. I watch Netflix, turn on the audio description. once again, audio description is it's an additional audio track to a film, to a video, that describes the visuals that are going on, and the description happens in between the dialogue, so it's not talking over the dialogue. And so in things like Netflix, I've noticed the audio description now does tell me the color of a person, for example, and I find that useful because I want to know, because it's not wrong for me, to know someone's race or gender, because other people can see that information. So it's only right that I have access to that information. But yes, I can understand in some contexts it might just be a bit, it might not be appropriate, but definitely things like race, I would like to know. And this is my opinion. Some obviously other people might have a different opinion on that.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the kind of just approaching things from a human perspective and like what's relevant within any given context. I think that's really useful to just apply. So thank you. The second part of Parsi's question was regarding spoken information in a video. When narrating visual information, it's usually frowned upon to repeat information that's shown in the visuals. So I think what would be really good is, I'm sorry to kind of ask you again, Addy, to kind of hear from you about the kind of best practice when it comes to adding description to video, basically.
Like an audio description,
Yeah.
to a video. I think the I think the best approach is to try and make your videos as inclusive, as descriptive in the dialogue almost as possible. So there's less need for an additional audio description to be added. So this is one approach people do, and where if we were in a film and I'm passing you a cup of coffee in the film, not a very exciting film, instead of saying here you go, then the audio description would have to say, Addy passes a cup of coffee over to Meg or Ali or something like that. Instead of saying here you go, I could just say, here you go, Meg, there's a coffee. There's no description required for that bit, you see? So if you can try and make your videos, and then also then that video, if someone was just listening, that video could be turned into a podcast very easily, It was like the example that was given earlier on about the graphs. It was said, there's a look here, there's a dramatic increase, as you can see from the graph. If someone was listening to that just as audio, or if that was made into a podcast, there's more longevity here. If that was made into a podcast, person would miss out on the number increase. But if you were just to reword that, this graph shows that there's been a $2 million increase. There you go. So someone doesn't even need to be looking at the video, or someone could be washing the dishes, or they could be doing anything. You've provided within that one recording, you've provided a way for people to see it and hear it, and they can do that. So yeah, I think it's just to think about going back to when you're creating content, to try and build into the script that, if someone's not looking at it, they can make the most of it. So yeah, that's the audio description side of things.
Yeah, that was really useful. Sorry, just to add on to that, I think you make a really good point about it being frowned upon to repeat information, but in this context, we're not repeating the information, we're just framing it differently and making sure that the content is as accessible or more accessible than it would be without that kind of context. I think it's really interesting, having worked with some podcasters, of how their brain works a little bit differently in their practice. If they're walking around with a microphone, they do narrate things slightly differently of things, and that's a really interesting exercise to go through, I think. So yeah, thank you, Addy.
Lovely. Thank you as well, Meg. So we've got a few questions about alt text, and I think for the sake of trying to get to everybody's questions, I think I might combine them a little. So I think there are a couple of questions about how best to provide alt text on social media, and whether that should be in a caption So, you know, at the end of the caption in brackets, or whether it's best to use the kind of inbuilt functionality for people to add and access alt text. I imagine it's better to use the inbuilt functionality, but that comes from a place of ignorance, and I don't know if that's actually the best practice when it comes to alt text. So yeah, is there any expertise on that?
Just a few things on alt text. Yeah, it does depend on the context, what you write in the alt text. The screen reader will read the alt text when you swipe onto it, if it's in the image. But if within the actual post, if you're writing something, if you're already explaining what's going on in the image, then you could leave it, you could give it an empty alt text so that it's not being announced. So there is some repetition there. So if within the body you're writing what is the same as what's in the alt text, then there could be a case there that you can just put it in one or the other. I don't have a clear stance on what would be better, but I think definitely in a situation where you're not able to technically put alt text on the image, then definitely if you can write it in the body, that's great.
Yeah, fab, thank you. And I think that goes back to just kind of thinking about the context and approaching things from a human perspective. This is a really interesting question that we've had from Emma, so thank you, Emma. And we've kind of talked a lot about the kind of functionality of alt text, and Emma is asking, is there a particular style that's best for alt text? So Emma says, I've seen some people / organizations use a more conversational style, while others are more formal. Is there one that's kind of more widely accepted or better for screen readers than the other? Or is it something that you can use to kind of portray your organization's style and brand? I think that's a really interesting question.
I think definitely it's something you can put your brand into it. Obviously, there's certain limits to how long your alt text should be, and alt text is a little bit, if you're navigating social media on a desktop platform, alt text is a little bit difficult to navigate with a screen reader. It's a bit limited how a screen reader can kind of navigate, say, word for word. If you wanted to, if some of the alt text didn't make sense to you and you want to start navigating it word for word, that's a little bit difficult. And so we try and keep alt text clear and concise. But yeah, obviously if you're, especially depending, once again, depends on the context and the image. If it's something funny or something sarcastic or something, if you've got like a serious functional description of it, you're going to lose the point of it. So definitely have it written in a style that is helpful and is in line with the tone that image is trying to convey. A few practical things. A screen reader does announce when something's an image. So you don't have to write in the copy of the alt text, this is an image of. You don't need to do that because the screen reader will tell you it's an image. However, if it's a portrait of someone, you can maybe write portrait to show that it's not just a photograph. But yeah, and there's different types of images, and the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, they have quite a good alt decision tree. So it asks you a few questions of the type of image you've got, and then it gives you some recommendations on how to write the alt text for that. So we can share the link to that. I can try and find that.
Oh, fab, thank you so much. Okay, great. So we do have, I think there's a couple more questions in the chat which haven't been answered yet. I think we've probably got time for one more, and then we will have to wrap up, I'm afraid, because I'm conscious that people have got other meetings and such to go to. So just very quickly, this is one from Fotini. So what's the best way to write alt text for GIFs? I think it's GIFs technically. I never know how to pronounce that word. So sometimes GIFs are quickly animated visuals with cultural references, for instance, film characters, etc., to emphasize a quote or a series of images / sides. How can the alt text convey the same sharp, often funny content of the GIF? And is that an accessible format of content to use?
I think this speaks to Addie's previous point actually about tone, and depending on the context, everything's contextual, of course. It absolutely is appropriate to convey the tone. So you can say funny or sarcastic or comical or fast-paced to kind of convey that context. And if there is text on the GIF, for example, this is an incredibly random example that's jumped into my head, but Monica from Friends with the turkey on her head, conveying that visual sense that you get along with the text as well will be really important. So yeah, I think obviously feel free to add anything else to that, but definitely speaks to tone for me.
Thank you. And thank you, Addie. I've just seen that Addie's popped the alt text decision tree into the chat now. So we are getting very close to past. I'm conscious that everybody will have things to go to. So I think we will start wrapping up today. I'm just going to share any links mentioned in the chat now, just so that anybody that needs to grab those can do. But just to wrap up, to let you know, we run webinars like this one every month. So please do check out our full program, which is linked in the chat now. Our next 3 sessions, which are on the screen currently, are on the 25th of May. We've got a session on how artificial intelligence will impact the future of arts, culture, and heritage marketing. On the 27th of June, we will look at copywriting for social media. And on the 20th of July, we will look at how you can leverage the power of influencer marketing as an arts, cultural, or heritage organization. So we've actually got up until the end of the year planned. So please feel free to have a look and sign up to any that are of interest. We would love to see you again. And finally, we have a quarterly newsletter that we send out every 3 months, and we include blog posts on digital marketing, updates on our webinars, insights from the HDK team, and a little bit about some of the work that we've been doing with within this sector. So if you want to sign up, the link is also in the chat now. And with that, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. Special thanks to Addie for sharing your time and your wonderful expertise with us. It's been so appreciated.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me.